In the dazzling world of ancient Rome, hidden behind the marble columns and golden palaces, there existed a dark reality that history has frequently ignored. While we praise Rome's military victories, amazing buildings, and legal systems, we seldom mention those who suffered the most to create this luxury, young men forced to live as male concubines for the rich and powerful. These weren't ordinary servants or slaves doing household chores. They were real people, caught in a system built to use their youth, beauty, and helplessness for the entertainment of Rome's upper class. Their experiences show us a side of the Roman Empire that contradicts our idealized picture of this old society, revealing the harsh truth of being powerless in a world where strength decided what was right. The Roman Empire's approach to intimate relationships was very different from today's views, where we recognize clear lines between agreement and force. Romans saw a complicated order where power controlled everything. At the bottom were young men, often captured from defeated lands or born into slavery, pushed into roles they never wanted. These young men, some only teenagers, were picked not for their abilities or smarts, but for how they looked and their assumed talent for entertaining their masters. They existed in endless uncertainty, never knowing when they'd be called, what would be demanded, or how saying yes or no might change their survival chances. The selection process itself treated them like objects. Wealthy Romans visited slave markets like modern people visit animal auctions, checking possible purchases for their bodies, age, and background. Young men from Greece were especially prized for their imagined sophistication and learning, while those from Germanic tribes were valued for their light skin and strong build. Buyers ignored the terror these young men surely felt, standing naked and helpless, while strangers argued over their value. After purchase, these concubines entered homes where their lives stopped being their own. They had to be ready at any time, guess their master's needs before being told, and always seem willing, no matter how they truly felt. The mental damage from this life is hard to exaggerate. Picture being made to smile and act, thankful while suffering treatment that attacked every part of your self-respect and freedom. A male concubine's daily life changed based on his master's tastes and social standing. Some stayed in fancy rooms, wore expensive clothes, and got education and cultural access, but always knowing these benefits had a hidden cost. Others lived in conditions little better than regular slaves, used only when their master wanted company, then sent back to spaces with no privacy, no belongings, and no escape hope. Their situation was especially heartbreaking because they had no legal protection or escape options. While Roman law offered some safety for citizens, and even some rights for slaves, male concubines lived in a gray zone where their master's wishes outweighed any concern for their welfare. They couldn't ask authorities for help, couldn't build real relationships with others, and couldn't even show their pain without risking punishment. The mind games these young men faced were perhaps more destructive than the physical parts of their slavery. Masters often used tricks meant to break their will and create dependence. Some concubines got special treatment or temporary kindness only to lose these rewards as punishment for small mistakes. This caused constant worry and confusion, as they never knew if they were favored or about to be punished. Many masters purposely cut off their concubines from other household members, blocking friendships or support groups that could offer emotional help. This isolation was especially cruel for young men ripped from families and communities, since it stopped them keeping any link to their old identities or cultures. The competitive atmosphere in some homes added another layer of mental torture. When masters kept several concubines, they often made them compete for attention and special treatment. This stopped victims from uniting and created constant pressure and betrayal. Young men who might have found comfort in shared suffering instead fought for their master's approval, knowing losing favor could mean even worse treatment. The education some concubines received was itself a control method. While learning to read, write, and talk about philosophy might seem like chances, these skills were taught mainly to make concubines better entertainers. They were supposed to discuss books and politics, but only in ways that pleased their masters. Their schooling was just another tool to mold them into better objects for their owner's enjoyment. Physical looks were maintained through strict routines. Concubines couldn't refuse. They had to exercise often, follow special diets, and do grooming habits that kept them young-looking and attractive. Some even got beauty treatments or surgeries to change their appearance based on their master's wishes. These procedures happened without modern medicine or pain relief, making them both risky and agonizing. The clothes and jewelry concubines wore served as decorations and ownership symbols. Masters often bragged about how nicely they could dress their companions, treating them like living dolls instead of people. The sad truth was that, though concubines might wear silk and gold, they stayed completely powerless under these beautiful coverings. Travel was another part of their lives that seemed privileged, but was actually more control. Some concubines went with masters to other cities or regions, but this travel was never by choice. They were essentially movable property, expected to give the same services anywhere while adjusting to new places and social settings without complaint. Roman household social rules created extra problems for male concubines. Though they might live in wealth, they had no real standing in the home's order. Other slaves might disrespect them, seeing their job as disgraceful, while free household members treated them as passing amusements, instead of people deserving respect. The effect on families left behind can't be ignored. When young men became concubines, their families usually never found out what happened to them. Parents might spend years guessing if their sons lived or died, never knowing they were stuck in situations with almost no escape. This separation was particularly brutal in cultures where family ties were holy and community support was vital for survival. Some concubines were gotten through debt slavery, where families in financial disaster had to surrender sons to pay debts. These families faced the terrible choice between watching all children starve or giving up one son to save the rest. The mental weight on both families and the young men was crushing, since everyone knew the sacrifice involved. The few records of concubines trying to escape showed desperate young men taking huge risks for the smallest freedom chance. Punishments for failed escapes were harsh and public, meant to scare others from trying. These punishments often included not just physical hurt, but public shame, as masters wanted to show total control over their property. Some concubines tried to stop their suffering through suicide, but even this last escape was usually blocked. Masters who spent large amounts buying and keeping concubines took steps to prevent this property loss, like constant watching and removing anything usable for self-harm. Rome's religious life gave no comfort to these young men. While Romans prayed to gods of protection and justice, these divine safeguards clearly didn't cover male concubines. Some found peace in foreign faiths or secret cults, but even these spiritual practices had to be hidden. As masters controlled every part of their concubines' lives, including beliefs, the economic value put on concubines created a market that encouraged constant capturing and selling of young men. Wealthy Romans competed to get the most handsome or skilled companions, raising prices and giving traders reasons to keep supplying this market. Turning humans into products peaked in these deals where young men's lives were simplified to money amounts. Training schools existed just to prepare young men for concubine lives, much like gladiator schools readied fighters. These places were as cruel as they were money-making, methodically destroying students' personalities and resistance, while teaching skills expected by future masters. The teaching included not only physical training but mental conditioning designed to create obedient, good-looking companions. The age when young men started this life varied, but many were still children when their futures were fixed. The effect on their development can't be overstated. These boys never got to form normal relationships, follow their own interests, or even learn what healthy human connections look like. Local differences in concubine treatment showed the variety of cultures within the Roman Empire, but none gave true safety or dignity. In some areas, local traditions offered slightly better conditions, while in others, treatment was harsher. But everywhere, the basic lack of freedom and independence stayed the same. Concubine retirement or aging presented another cruel part of their existence. Unlike other slaves who might earn or buy freedom, concubines losing their looks usually found themselves thrown away with nothing for independent life. Some masters simply left their aging companions, while others sold them to poorer homes where conditions were often worse. The rare concubines who got freedom and some later success stand out because they were so unusual. These people usually had to totally remake themselves, hiding their past while fighting the mental harm from earlier experiences. Their success stories, though uplifting, also show how rare it was for anyone to leave this system whole. Medical care for concubines came not from kindness, but to protect their value as property. Masters wanted investments healthy and appealing, so they gave medical help when needed. But this care focused only on keeping looks and function, ignoring mental health or long-term effects. Roman elite society accepting this system tells us much about ancient Rome's moral structure. While Romans boasted about honor, duty, and goodness, these ideas apparently only mattered for proper free citizens. Concubine suffering was simply left out of moral thinking, showing how fully they'd been made less than human in Roman society. Some concubines created what we'd now call survival methods, learning to read their master's moods, predict wishes, and handle complicated household social rules. While these skills helped avoid worse punishments, they also forced them to become skilled actors, always showing happiness and thanks while hiding true feelings. Roman social life's seasonal patterns affected concubines too. During big festivals and parties, they might have to join fancy shows, while calmer times might give short breaks from constant attention. But even quiet times were filled with worry about the next summons. Talking with other concubines or slaves was often limited. But when possible, these young men built their own support and information networks. They learned to communicate through small gestures and secret language, sharing warnings about masters' moods or giving comfort during hard times. These connections, though necessarily hidden, gave key emotional help in an otherwise lonely life. This system's effect reached beyond its direct victims to shape Roman society overall. Making it normal to treat humans as pleasure objects added to a wider culture of using and dehumanizing people. This cultural acceptance helped Romans excuse other cruelties and oppressions, from gladiator games to violently stopping slave rebellions. Archaeological finds offer peeks into these forgotten victims' lives. Items from rich Roman homes include things probably used to control or watch concubines, plus personal objects hinting at daily routines. But most proof of their existence has vanished over time, just as their voices were silenced in life. Mentions of male concubines in Roman writings are usually short and vague, showing writers wanted to admit these relationships without describing disturbing details. But reading between these lines, we see lives marked by helplessness and abuse. Times when concubines were sold between masters were especially traumatic, facing new homes, different demands, and unknown cruelty levels. Each move meant restarting survival learning in a new place while keeping mental defenses that saved them before. Some masters treated concubines as temporary fun, soon losing interest in selling them or making them regular household slaves. Others formed long-term bonds that, while still basically exploitative, gave some steadiness and predictability. Neither situation gave real security, since the concubine's future always depended completely on their master's changing moods. Wealthy Roman seasonal moves between city homes and country houses meant many concubines spent lives shifting between different places and social scenes. This endless adapting needed huge mental flexibility, while stopping them from ever setting roots or making lasting ties with places or people. Teaching concubines music, poetry, and talk created a cruel twist. They learned to value beauty and culture while being blocked from creating or adding to these areas themselves. They became living holders of artistic knowledge and talent, but always for others' enjoyment, not their own expression. Physical training forced on concubines aimed to keep their appeal to masters, but these programs were often extreme and painful. Young men had to bear whatever exercise, food limits, or body changes masters ordered, no matter the physical or mental cost. Rome's seasonal parties and festivals created extra pressure for concubines, often expected to join big shows or private celebrations. These events might look fun from outside, but for involved concubines, they meant more chances for humiliation and abuse. Making personal relationships between concubines and other household members was hard because of their unclear status. Though they might live well, everyone knew their place depended entirely on their master's favor, making real friendship or love almost impossible. Regional trade networks supplying young concubines stretched across the whole Mediterranean world and beyond. This system encouraged war, kidnapping, and debt slavery as traders met demand from wealthy Roman homes. The human cost of keeping this supply line going was massive, hurting not just victims but whole communities and cultures. Concubine training and conditioning involved not just learning skills but suffering. Mental manipulation meant to break resistance and create dependence. Masters and their agents became experts at finding and using mental weaknesses, using methods we'd now call organized abuse. Concubines, clothes, and jewelry served many purposes beyond decoration. These items showed their status, displayed their master's wealth and style, and constantly reminded them they lacked freedom. Even their physical appearance wasn't theirs to control. Medical and beauty treatments forced on concubines often included painful, dangerous, or permanently damaging procedures. These practices happened without concern for consent or comfort, treating their bodies as objects to alter based on masters' preferences. Growing up or spending key years in such conditions caused lasting harm affecting every part of these young men's lives. They never got to form normal ideas about agreement, independence, or healthy relationships, making recovery very hard even if freed later. The social separation forced on many concubines stopped them from developing social abilities or connections that might have helped survival or escape. This isolation was often intentional, as masters wanted to prevent their property from forming alliances or getting outside help. Economic decisions deciding concubines' fates turned humans into simple money values. Prices changing with age, looks, skills, and origin. This thing-making made it easier for masters to treat them as throwaway objects rather than humans deserving basic respect. Normalizing this level of abuse and dehumanization affected Roman society far beyond direct victims. A culture that accepted organized mistreatment of helpless young men was ready to accept other cruelties and unfairness. Adding to the wider oppression pattern, marking much Roman history, the few signs we have of concubine resistance and rebellion show the desperate steps some took to claim their humanity and self-respect. These defiant acts, though usually useless and harshly punished, prove the human spirit couldn't be fully broken even under the worst pressure. Rome's religious and philosophical systems gave no real protection or comfort to these victims. While Romans discussed complex ethics and goodness questions, they apparently saw no conflict between these high ideas and systematically using powerless young men. Roman social life's seasonal rhythms created predictable abuse patterns, with certain times bringing more demands on concubines' time and energy. These patterns meant even during calmer times, they lived knowing busier, harder periods were coming. This system's effect on concubines, original families, and communities can't be ignored. Losing young men to this trade hurt not just direct victims but entire social groups, adding to wider damage and pain from Roman growth and abuse. Concubine training and preparation included organized methods for destroying mental defenses and creating obedience. These techniques were improved over generations, making a system both effective and destructive for its victims. Roman society's legal structure gave concubines no meaningful protection, treating them as property rather than people with rights. This legal invisibility hid their suffering too, letting masters act without punishment while society ignored it. The money motivations behind this system created a repeating cycle of abuse. Its profits from human trading encouraged continuous capturing and mistreatment of young men. Breaking this cycle would have needed basic changes to Roman society and values that never happened. The physical and mental conditioning forced on concubines aimed to create perfect obedience, but its human cost was huge. Young men were methodically stripped of independence, dignity, and selfhood, often never getting these essential human parts back even if freed later. We think about these forgotten stories of suffering and survival. We must remember that behind every history number was a real person with hopes, fears, and dreams never allowed to grow. Ancient Rome's concubines weren't history footnotes, but individuals whose lives reveal key truths about power, abuse, and human strength. Their experiences challenge us to look past Rome's marble fronts and golden treasures to see the human price of this civilization's greatness. They remind us that historical progress often costs society's most helpless members, and that luxury and power's price was frequently paid by those with no choice. The organized nature of this abuse shows how easily societies can make cruelty normal and official when it helps the powerful. Romans' ability to keep up complex philosophical and legal systems while running this human trafficking network shows how moral thinking can become selective when questioning existing power structures. These young men's lives also show the amazing toughness of the human spirit. Despite facing situations meant to destroy them completely, many found ways to keep some self and dignity. Their small acts against masters, moments connecting with others, and will to live represent human victories over organized dehumanization. Understanding their stories helps us spot similar abuse patterns today. While specific forms may differ, the basic power, weakness, and organized oppression dynamics stay important now. Their lives warn what happens when societies let the powerful treat humans as objects for their enjoyment and gain. The long silence around these stories shows our ongoing discomfort admitting history's full unfairness. By returning these forgotten voices to history's awareness, we respect their memory and recall our duty to stop such organized abuse happening again. Ancient Rome's concubines lived and died in conditions no human should ever face. Their story should be remembered not as exciting history oddities, but as proof of human suffering and strength. Remembering them, we admit their humanity and promise to build a world where such abuse becomes impossible. Their lasting effect challenges us to check our own society's treatment of its weakest members and wonder what future historians might find about the organized unfairness we ignore or accept today. The questions their lives raise about power, agreement, human worth stay as important now as 2,000 years ago. Finally, the terrible life of a male concubine in the Roman Empire stands as a strong reminder that civilization's biggest successes often sit on foundations of horrible cruelty. By understanding and admitting this truth, we honor those who suffered and promise ourselves that such organized dehumanization never again becomes progress and prosperity as hidden cost.